Welcome to my channel, Delightful Stories. I'll be happy if you subscribe to my channel and like it. Enjoy watching and don't forget to leave your opinion in the comments about the story. Tony noticed how his fiance's pretty face creased as he told her about the day at the office. "Honey, there's nothing wrong with you." He took the woman under his elbow and helped her onto the couch. "What do you think?" she hissed, holding onto her large belly. The baby was less than 3 weeks away, and the woman dreaded every push of her baby. As much as she was tired of walking around with her burden, she didn't want to give birth at all. If only there was some way to stop it. "I'm so tired. I can't stand it," Hermione declared capriciously. Tony was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. His fiancée kept pestering him with stories about how he was feeling. Every day brought him a new unpleasantness. "I can't imagine how you deal with it." Out of habit, he consoled men. Naively, he did this, even without wanting to comfort the woman, but with the intention of stopping the flow of complaints. He did not know how to do better than to help her. After all, she was never satisfied anyway. "If I could carry our baby instead of you, believe me, I would. Just so you wouldn't suffer. It's easy for you to promise when you can't do anything. Bring me some orange juice. Make sure you warm it up. I don't want to catch a cold at the end of my term." Letting Hermione's commanding tone pass his ears, Tony calmly made his way to the refrigerator and did as he had to. He knew better than to argue. It was the only thing that had saved him the last few weeks. The man loved his fiancée. He wanted to build a family with her, so he was willing to go to any lengths. "You are beautiful in any form." The man kissed her on the cheek and extinguished her by the bed. Hermione was angry at her fiancé, at the unborn child, and at life for so deciding her fate. The young woman had no hatred for children, and in about 4 years she saw herself as a happy mother. But not now. Hermione was only 24. She had just graduated, and now she was pregnant. A woman anticipating a fancy wedding her parents could afford, a honeymoon somewhere in the islands, travel, interesting acquaintances, shopping, lots of new hobbies. But the baby developing in her womb all at once canceled all the plan. At first she even considered not saying anything to Tanya and getting rid of the baby, but she was afraid of the consequences. If the truth came out, the man would not listen to any assurances and would probably leave. In their relationship, Tony often made concessions, but he felt as if his fiancée didn't take him seriously, so he tried to play things up in his favor every chance he got. His friends warned him that this would happen, and if the marriage is unequal, if the woman takes the upper hand over the man, it will be so. "My love," Tony said in his lover's ear, "we may not have everything according to plan, but we love each other, and we will endure everything. Can our little angel ruin our lives? When he comes to M and gets stronger, we'll have a wedding that'll make all your friends bite their elbows." "Oh, he's sucking up," Hermione muttered angrily and snuggled comfortably into her fiancé's arms. Despite her constant complaints about not feeling well, Hermione wasn't about to give up her usual rhythm of life. She loved the city atmosphere, shopping, sitting with girlfriends in interesting places. Her loved ones knew that the woman loved attention, loved to be comforted, so they often exaggerated her suffering or the unpleasant events she had to endure. "I don't understand how you put up with yours." Emma shook her head, throwing her leg over her leg in the velvet chair of the coffee shop. Hermione appreciated such concern and calmed down for a while. The women had been friends for about 10 years. Together they went through the teenage period of their first crush. The first breakup. If mine snored endlessly, I'd kick him out of bed. Laughed supporting my belly. "I'm afraid Tony is hanging on by his fingertips." "What if I get sick or my waters break in the night?" "No, I want him by my side." The pregnant woman was hiding again, and this time it really hurt. "Emma, call an ambulance," she demanded. "Call it now, I'm not kidding," Hermione screamed, attracting the attention of curious visitors and staff. All the way to the hospital, Hermione squeezed Emma's hand more than once, admonishing her. Tony was in a meeting. He couldn't be distracted from his work at every call from his cranky bride, so his friend replaced him. Upon examination, the doctor found no reason to be alarmed, but Hermione insisted on her own. "I'm going to go to the hospital today. We gave so much money to that clinic. We could open our own. Will they find a place for me today, or will I drag them through the courts? Do you think there is a risk of premature birth? Do you need anything from home? Can I bring it to you?" No. Stay with me for now. I don't want to be alone. Tony will take over for you tonight." Hermione's fiancé freaked out when he didn't find her in the apartment, then listened to the voicemails left by her friend. The man rushed to the clinic with a bag of supplies he had prepared beforehand. He couldn't find himself, he was afraid. But the woman just panicked and terrorized. The medical staff assured her that there was no way she would give birth before the due date. "God, honey, I was so scared." Tony flew into the room and sat down on the bride's bed. "We're fine, but we could be better. I've decided to stay here until the birth. If you think it's best, I agree." Tony exhaled with relief at first, hoping for a break from Hermione after so many hectic months. But she wouldn't let him relax. The woman demanded that he stay the night with her on the uncomfortable couch. And then he would drive home, shower, change into a clean suit, and drive to work. Driving from one end of town to the other, just for the whim of his fiancée. Tony got tired of it fast. "No offense, but we both need our rest. And I'm also earning money for our baby. We need to sleep it off while we can. That's as far as the baby will let us go. You think I can sleep without you? These nurses' hands, they can't even put in an IV the first time. How can you trust them? And how can you trust them? And who recommended my father to this clinic? The service is terrible. Hermione wouldn't let my fiancé leave. You're like a child, honestly. You were getting mad, Tony. I can't sit by your bed 24 hours a day. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm not an Iron Man." "That's how. Well, get out of here. I can't be here without you. I miss you. And you want to leave me for strangers." Hermione covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook. Seeing the tears, the man immediately felt like an incredible jerk. He couldn't stand a distraught bride. Immediately he softened. He felt guilty. She was carrying his child. She's hormonal. She's disconnected from home, stuck in unfamiliar surroundings. And he wore on her. Trying to make amends and give his beloved a smile, Tony visited her every day with little ins. But all he got was a new dose of dissatisfaction. The man didn't know what he could do to make it stop. He hoped that the baby would be here soon and Emma would be too busy to waste her energy on idle talk. "Oh my God." The janitor mutters to herself that she has witnessed another lover's quarrel. The guys all over her, giving her gifts, waiting for her baby. The head nurse whispered to her, "Keep your indignation at the patient down. After all, our people are serious." But the girl really is awful. Many even doubted that she was genuinely expecting the baby she was carrying. But soon their opinion of the woman changed dramatically. After 3 excruciating weeks under medical supervision, on the night of Friday to Saturday, Hermione was transported to the maternity ward. The baby came easily. The woman gave birth on her own. To the surprise of all the staff, she behaved as any caring mother should. Many women in labor could not understand their feelings after their firstborn child was born. They could not believe that they had brought a new tiny person into this world. They couldn't experience tenderness for their child, but Hermione became the model mother. She happily took her baby boy in her arms, fed him, asked the nurses how to handle the baby in the first weeks of life. She asked for advice. How small he was. Hermione almost whispered, weeping as she held the baby in her arms. "I can't believe it. It's just a miracle. He's wonderful. The staff who used to censure the cranky patient now looked at her with admiration and genuine joy. Only soon they were to seriously upset the young parents, unpleasant news that required them to endure, and all the love that was in them. Do you see how much you care for Michael? The doctor began a challenging conversation, looking at the quiet boy in his arms, concerned about his mother's words. I'm sure you will love him in every way and never make him feel inferior. Wait, what are you talking about? And the same one frowned, preparing to repel any verbal attack, and she clutched her son tighter to her. The fact is that because of the congenital abnormality and the probability that the boy will be healthy is 85, Hermione's stomach snapped. She looked at the little sleeping lump and imagined his life journey with such an ailment. The hardships they would have to go through, the bullying and ridicule that would haunt Michael. Was it really that scary? You can fix it somehow, have an operation after all? I'm sorry, but that's not the case with you. The woman did not let the doctor finish his sentence, interrupting him with her own objections. My baby, my firstborn, will be flawed. Everyone will point the finger at us and discuss how we can't do better. No, I don't tolerate that. I will not be a mother, colleagues. What if he gets worse in the future, if all he has ahead of him is a wheelchair? And we, the parents, will have to be around all the time because he can't take care of himself. It's a lifetime of not being able to go anywhere, forgetting your own interests, being chained to a disabled child as tightly as he is to his chair. Wait, you're looking too far ahead. I understand the news is hard and requires a lot of courage to accept it. Your son is quite complete. He will be somewhat limited in his movements. But otherwise, unlike his peers, there is nothing to be afraid of. With your financial resources, will you provide your child with the right level of care and medical care and medical care? No. It's not for me. I won't be the mother of an invalid. You can't give me a guarantee. What if he gets worse? I don't want to be tied to an incapacitated child forever. Honey, maybe it's not that bad. Tony tried to reassure the bride by putting his hand on her shoulder. Look how sweet our baby is. We can't keep him. We can. You're not the one who will be the talk of the town. You are not the one who will be pointed at. The child is the mother's responsibility forever. And I'm not ready. No, we'll keep him in an orphanage. There's an institution for kids like that. Better now than getting attached to him. We mustn't drag it out. Hermione was determined. She immediately put Michael in the hands of the nurse and never took him again or showed any concern. The staff was surprised by this change of heart in the young mother and secretly discussed the situation among themselves. How could that be? Whispered the experienced nurses, who had seen various mutilations of infants in their lifetime. What a cuckoo she is, enjoying life herself. And she didn't even give her son a chance. It is a shame to call such mothers. They give birth to a child for their own pleasure. They don't think at all about the little life they brought into this world. The baby will know why his mother abandoned him. There will be a constant feeling of inadequacy. Such children have no hope of ever being adopted by a decent family. Who needs invalids when there are plenty of healthy children without defects? Tony disagreed with his fiancée's decision, but could not object in full. The man knew what kind of family he was messing with, knew what a son-in-law he was becoming. That's why he kept his temper under control. Honey, can't we talk about this in peace one more time? Yes, softly, sitting down on Hermione's bed. Are you scared? But the doctor said... I heard what they said, the woman cheered him on. I'm well aware of our family's prospects. Believe me, I'm only worried about us. I'm still young. We'll have another one, and we'll watch this one. Donate money to the orphanage. We're not leaving him, really. Tony, I know how much you've been looking forward to this baby. But he's not the one we want. It was no use arguing. The depressed man forced himself to give up Michael, entrusting his life to his fiancée. He hoped they would have better luck in the future. Hermione rejoiced. Tony agreed with her without scandal or resentment. Any other case, she would have considered fighting for her child. Besides, she had discovered that she could feel tenderness for the little creature, wanted to take care of it, and was ready to be a mother after all. However, this time it was easier for her to part with her son for the simple reason that her fiancé was not the father of the born Michael. It was a secret Hermione kept diligently, not telling anyone, not even Emma. The price of adultery was too high to share their experiences, even with the closest. For the entire duration of her pregnancy, the woman was unable to drive her fiancé. I hope the truth doesn't come out in some inexplicable way. And Hermione got pregnant by accident. Completely unplanned affair with a brutal stranger. Last October, when grief struck Emma's family, Hermione decided to support her close friend. God, I don't know what to do. Emma cried. Her friends told her on the phone that her mother had a heart problem and needed a transplant. Why did it happen so abruptly? Aren't there any symptoms? Didn't she feel anything? Didn't she complain? Our parents are old school people. Hermione gently consoled her as she drove the car at dusk down the country highway toward the village where her mother lived. They wouldn't admit under fear that they were in pain. Either they are brave or they don't want to spend money on doctors. And the result is always the same: a hospital room and a lot of pills. Don't worry, I told my dad. He promised to make sure that your mother is well looked after. She'll rest in a private room until the operation. She'll be treated like a queen. Trust me. The further conversation was interrupted by the screeching of the wheels and Hermione's shrieks. Girlfriend, what happened there? Emma, without waiting for an intelligible answer from the woman. What's the matter? Where are you? I'm here, all right, Hermione admitted. I think I hit something sharp, a flat tire. I can't change it myself. I'll have to call someone. It's getting dark out here, and there's not a soul around. Being alone in the middle of the fields in the twilight of the coming night was a great trial for the woman. For the first time, she was torn away from home and helpless. The first driver of the car seeing a lonely woman in distress on the road. The first driver of the car and drove past. The second man joked something maliciously about the women behind the wheel and drove on. And it didn't get scary. None of the acquaintances she reached dared give up their business and drive into the middle of nowhere. It was becoming more and more disturbing by the minute. The woman felt panic overcome her as she was ready to fall into despair. As she passed by the curb, a man on a bicycle stopped. He was young, but his clothes and his whole appearance suggested that he was some kind of vagrant. Can I help you? The stranger turned to Hermione. The woman could have refused, but she had no hope of a better savior. Please be so kind. I have a flat tire. I can't replace it myself. I don't know how. She admitted to her shame. Later, the man offered to take her to his humble home for some hot tea. You're all wet. Your lips and nails are already blue. I'm not going to hurt you, don't worry. Hermione didn't argue, for some reason entrusting her life to Jacob. His place was a rustic 3-room house, the kind that was being torn down everywhere these days. It was poor, but the fact that the landlord kept it clean was immediately apparent. This aroused in Hermione an even greater respect for the concerned man. A forbidden conversation during which she was finally able to relax. The woman discerned pleasant features in Jacob's face. Most of all, she liked his big, kind eyes. She didn't want to leave at all. It so happened that a one-night stand brought the two lonely people together and then drove them apart. Tony had been trying to get favor with his new bosses at the time. Stayed away from home for weeks, was on business trips and complied with any whim of management. From the same emanated a kind of inner strength that attracted a woman. The result of a single night spent together was the birth of Michael. The groom had no idea of the betrayal. That is why it was harder for him to decide to leave his son in an orphanage. The boy would grow up and change, becoming unrecognizable. But what both parents would remember for a long time was the birthmark right on his left wrist. Ever since Hermione and Tony gave up their son and recovered from their losses, enough time had passed to return to forgotten plans. The young woman had dreamed of a wedding and could now take care of the arrangements. Her fiancé was heartbroken that their child was left behind, was cut out of their lives, but was in no hurry to part with her. The celebration promised to be grand. Eric, the father of the bride, spared no expense to satisfy the last whim of his only daughter. "This is my gift to you, daughter. From now on, I will put you in the hands of another man who will take care of you and provide for you." The man spoke softly but confidently, so that the woman finally stopped relying on her parents. "I'm more than happy about it and grateful for everything." Hermione hugged him, glad that her mother and father had never denied her anything. Just a loud celebration, a fancy wedding dress, a bunch of guests, entertainers, special effects, and fireworks didn't add to the young couple's happiness. With each month of marriage, the loss of the child affected their relationship more and more. Tony was not as attentive, not patient. Every whim of the spouse did not go over himself every time, just to settle the conflict. More and more often the man began to argue, defended his opinion, and in almost every quarrel reproached Hermione for being frightened by her son's literacy. To relatives and girlfriends, the married couple were perfect. The woman didn't take it lying down complaining about her husband's inattention. She herself was not happy to share shelter and a bed with him, to travel with him on vacation, or to spend shopping, depressing, and weekends in the same apartment. Contrary to the expectations of Eric, who considered the candidacy of a son-in-law promising, he did not live up to his expectations and remained an office worker, skipping ahead of his competitors who came into the company a little later than him. Tony was only able to take over as head of the department. While he had been promised the director's chair of the company, the once young professional's ambition had dulled. The man felt depressed and frustrated with his own abilities. Problems with his wife and futile attempts to have another child were taking all his strength and killing his self-confidence. Tony no longer aspired to anything. He considered himself a failure, and he sensed his spouse's attitude too, so he became visibly cold toward him. Every time she went to bed, she hoped she wouldn't get pregnant by him. Another identical day seemed hopelessly different. For 10 years, Hermione's family had been haunted by unhappiness. Not only did she and Tonya not get along, but her father's business also collapsed from outside the competition. Jaroslav had made an extremely unprofitable deal, so all of his business, built up over the years, began to suffer huge losses. The elderly man coped as best he could, but his worries completely threw him off balance. A heart attack also overtook him suddenly. While he was being treated away from home, his assistants completely bankrupted the firm. What caused it to go bankrupt? Now it wasn't Tony who had to tighten his belt with his father's help. Where did those shoes come from? The man rumbled from the hallway, looking at the incredibly expensive rhinestone pumps his wife was so fond of. "We have no money for such luxuries. We're middle class." Remember that. Don't worry about it. The family budget is not affected by this purchase. Hermione replied calmly, not taking her eyes off the fashion magazine. "I bought the pumps with my own money." "And where, may I ask, did you get your money from? You've never worked a day in your life. Everything you have comes from your father or your husband's efforts. You're not capable of anything. I married a successful young professional. And what did you get?" Tony was tired of this kind of criticism. But something kept him close to his wife. If before he had hoped for Eric, now he did not know why he stayed with his wife, whose bad temper discouraged any desire to be more tolerant to her. Mutual grievances and constant quarrels strangely kept the couple together. "I don't understand why you won't file for divorce." Emma spoke thoughtfully. She was the only one who knew that her friend's marriage wasn't as fabulous as it looked. You only hurt each other after all. Why not break up and try your luck with someone else? Who needs both of us? Hermione smiled sadly. I've been thinking about leaving. More than once I thought about it, but I was scared. Holidays rarely coincided with Tony's days off. So when he happened to be free on a city day, the couple decided not to waste the opportunity and enjoy the pleasant bustle of the streets together. The roads were blocked in some places. Everywhere there were booths with various souvenirs, jewelry, and prepared foods. Everywhere crowds of people, families with small children, scurried begging for a balloon or another unnecessary trinket. There were groups of young people who had escaped the tutelage of their parents, and mature couples watching the fun of others who had their whole lives ahead of them. Hermione watched the people with interest, habitually holding her husband under her arm, while Tony sadly saw off people with young children who were holding tightly to the arms of their mothers and fathers. The man hadn't given up hope of one day having a baby of his own and giving him all the love he deserved. Suddenly, Hermione noticed a familiar male face in the crowd. It was Jacob, right. Only now the man didn't look like a tramp. He was wearing comfortable jeans, a t-shirt, and a shirt. He wore a luxury watch and expensive sunglasses on his face. His phone was the latest model, and his car fob was sticking out of his pocket. The old Jacob couldn't afford such things, but he looked posh. And next to the man in step was a boy about 10 years old. He was walking briskly, perfectly healthy. Hermione swayed and almost fell right over on the boy's left wrist. She noticed a birthmark exactly like the one their son had been born with. The woman couldn't restrain her curiosity and pulled her husband to follow them. Greedily looking at both of them, she was taken with such envious resentment that words can't express. So they switched places. At first, Hermione had been rich, but now she barely had enough for a monthly trip to the manicurist. Jacob, on the other hand, had gone from dirt to princely. His back was straight, businesslike. And how did he know about Michael? Was he looking for his son on purpose? Why didn't he contact him? It didn't take long to follow Jacob and Michael. Tony wanted to go the other way. In an instant, she got too close. The man turned around and almost spotted her woman out of fear. She was afraid of getting caught. She was afraid of being seen in such a pathetic position that the sight of her would no longer thrill the man. Let's go to the shooting range. I haven't shot in a long time, Tony suggested. But my wife didn't want to lose sight of her son. You know, I don't feel good. I'm going home. And you stay. Don't worry, really, I'll get there myself, the man grumbled, but agreed. He decided that his wife had had enough of his company and decided to run away. Hermione not wasting a minute. She made her way through the crowd and caught up with Jacob. The man and his son headed for the parking lot, and she caught a cab behind them and told the driver to follow the Mercedes of an old acquaintance. The road led her to an upscale apartment complex where everyone could not pass. Leaving the car in the parking lot, Jacob and Michael entered the entryway. Hermione looked up at the high-rises, the apartment in which cost a lot of money. She used to be able to afford a place like that, but now she only had to dream. For an hour or so she wandered around the apartment complex, peering through the mirrored windows of the house. She could not come to terms with the fact that 10 years ago she had made the wrong choice. Does it ever happen that a man living on the brink of poverty suddenly becomes fabulously rich? Hermione was angry at him, at herself, at her circumstances. How could she have known that her future would be so different, that she would stay with an uninteresting and unfulfilled man, that she would not want a child from him and would regret their marriage? The woman decided that fate had given her a second chance. It was not for nothing that she met her son today. It was not for nothing that fate brought her back together with Jacob. She had to meet him, to remind him of herself and to claim a child. Hermione hadn't noticed a wedding ring on him, which meant it was worth a try. "Where the hell have you been?" asked Tony from the doorstep. He came back from his walk earlier than his wife, who cited ill health. I got stuck in traffic. She lied as she went along. I think I know where you got the new things. You got yourself a lover. Now he's providing for you. The man went ballistic. Don't be ridiculous. His wife cut him off. I don't know, he said. And she was all over the place, her eyes on him. After meeting Jacob, Hermione could no longer bear the company of her spouse. Tony irritated her more than usual, reminded her of the mistakes of her youth, of the wrong choices. She wished she could get Jacob's attention sooner and spend time with her son. Michael didn't suffer from the affliction, walking smoothly without leaning on his stick or his father's arm. Had the clinic deceived her? Had they frightened her into giving up the boy for nothing? If the woman had had the same means and power, she would have made the doctors accountable and dragged them through the courts. Things might have turned out differently if she had not left the child in the care of the state. We swarmed around in our heads with a frantic swarm, keeping us awake and deprived of sleep. Every morning, barely a door closed behind Matfei. She packed up and drove to the familiar apartment complex, crouched outside, peering at familiar faces. Hermione wanted to see her son one more time to get a closer look at him, to pull herself together and talk to Jacob. She hoped the man would let them talk. After all, she wasn't a stranger. She had given birth to his son and had the right to return. Hermione did a good job on herself that day, styling her hair and putting on a better pantsuit. Jacob showed up almost as soon as she arrived on the scene. The man was pulling out of the parking lot when she emerged right in front of the hood, nearly causing an accident. The driver honked his horn nervously, but she didn't move away. "Are you crazy? Make way," Jacob shouted. He looked out the window, but the stranger was still there. He had to walk away, hoping that the crazy lady would be frightened by his imposing height and leave in a nice way. "Well, hello, Jacob. Don't you recognize me?" The woman shrank back, exposing her face to the sun on all sides. "It's been so many years, but I haven't changed much. I don't know what games you're playing, folks, but you have me confused with someone else." How could I ever confuse the father of my child with anyone else? Charming, Hermione smiled, knowing that it would definitely make the man put things aside and listen to her. But he stared at her in bewilderment. "That's me, Michael's mom. I'm sorry, I'm in a hurry. I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm sure I don't know you." Jacob got in the car and pushed sharply on the gas, leaving the deranged woman shrouded in dust and smoke, staring after him. Hermione gasped in indignation. She wasn't used to being left without a clear answer in respect like that. She was ready to reprimand the uncooperative acquaintance, but she couldn't. She was left on the street completely confused. Hermione didn't leave trying to cross paths with Jacob again or to catch her son playing in the playground. Twice she watched the boy from the sidelines, but she was afraid to pitch in. She was already a sight for sore eyes among the residents of the apartment complex. The guard at the gatehouse looked suspiciously at the lone woman watching other people's children. Hermione was afraid he would call the police if she acted rashly. She didn't need any unnecessary fuss. The woman's house stopped responding to her husband's taunts and mostly ignored his presence. It wasn't out of spite or a desire to show Tony her indifferent. It was simply that Hermione was tormented by various thoughts, imagining how her life might have turned out. Don't give up on Michaela. The boy deserved a good, loving mother who wasn't intimidated by doctor's orders. I wonder how long he lived in an orphanage before his father tracked him down and adopted him. Before, the woman was not interested in the fate of her child, although thoughts of him closed in her mind during a particularly difficult time. Now she considered her unhappy marriage as payback for the abandoned child. If she'd had the courage to take responsibility for Michael, as he was growing up now, she might have had a very different life. Meeting Jacob and not being able to. Weeks later, the man rarely got out of his car without driving through the gate, fenced in at the apartment complex. and throwing herself under the wheels again. The woman didn't risk it. Noticing that Michael's father had left the car in the parking lot outside the store and gone shopping, she hurried to follow. You again. Jacob spotted the pursuers almost immediately. Look, I don't want to hurt you, but if you don't get away from me, or if you come near my son, I'll call the police and ambulance or whatever it is you need to be assigned to. But really? Michael's mom insisted, Hermione, continuing to walk beside me. I was on the side of the road by the car with our tire. You were riding your bike and helped me put the spare tire on. Do you remember? I know. It might be unpleasant for you to remember the old days. You lived a hard, vagabond life back then, but now you're established. I just need to see my son. I want to meet him. Understand, Jacob, I'm not crazy. The man paused again, looking around at the decent-looking, well-groomed woman. He didn't know what was going on in her head. How did she know his son's name? Why had she taken her son after him? But she didn't look dangerous. Though who knew these lunatics? The only reasonable conclusion came to mind. What are you, a gold digger, you say? I look like a friend of yours. You mentioned that I used to be poor, but now I'm better off. Maybe you're driven by a desire to get rich, too. I don't know. But stop harassing me, or I'll take action. Now it was her turn to be surprised. She couldn't understand why he hadn't admitted that he knew her. After all, we both know we're Michael's parents. Why are you so stubborn? She wouldn't let up. If he was going to make contact with her, she decided to press on until the very last. So the man looked tired. Michael is not my natural child. I adopted him. Who were his parents? I don't know, and I can't have children. My son got sick as a child, and my name isn't Jacob, it's Mickey. So please stop bothering me. After a week, Mickey decided that the abnormal had given up on him. But Hermione came up with a new plan to see her son, and once again waited for the man at home. What is it again? He asked without a greeting. I know how to prove to you that Michael is my real son. We'll do a DNA test. I have some money and I can arrange it. Look, all I want is to meet him. I made a mistake when I was young, but now I want to make it right. Please, let me do it. Mickey was in no hurry to trust Michael's mother of unknown origin. He knew nothing about her, nor did he know her motives for deciding to catch up after all these years. It was not uncommon for girls who dreamed of a beautiful life to meet men, but no one had ever thought of making up such a story. Okay, but I will order the expertise myself. The only thing I'll need from you is genetic material. Hermione ripped a hair out of her hair without a second thought and handed it to the man. Call me when you know the results, she asked and dictated her cell phone number. 2 weeks of waiting were difficult for the woman. She accepted the conditions and waited patiently. She did not tell Tony what she was thinking. She almost stopped talking to him during the last month. It seemed that her husband was also satisfied with the state of affairs. Constant quarrels and nagging were boring, and he enjoyed the peace. Soon after the call and Mickey's request for a meeting, Hermione hurried to the cafe. Yeah, I told you I wasn't lying, Hermione whispered. She cried uncontrollably when the man... But now, once again able to have a child, she was willing to accept any conditions. She was more obedient than ever to listen to the boy. What about literacy? The doctor said it was very likely Michael would limp for the rest of his life. Hermione inquired, not raising her eyes in shame over her past decision. I did. But I enlisted the services of a unique therapist who regularly worked with Michael. The treatment took a lot of time and effort, but it was worth it. My son doesn't have any discomfort. So that's why you left him. Hermione couldn't find the strength for words and just nodded. I was spoiled and stupid, she admitted. Michael was very lucky to be the son of such a father. They talked for a while longer, and before Mickey was about to leave, On the general account, Hermione did say, "I gave birth to Michael with your twin. I don't know if you're twins or not, but the resemblance is striking. I insist you can't not know I don't have brothers. I'm one child, but I'll ask my parents. If it's so important to you." Hermione had spent the last month on pins and needles. She hadn't heard from Mickey. They'd broken up last time. Not bad. The man no longer demanded to be disconnected from his family, but he didn't make himself known either. Hermione was afraid to impose. She hoped that Michael's adoptive father would make himself known, having time to think about it. She was looking out for her husband, decided it was worth filing for divorce. Now that her kinship with Michael had been established, she hoped that she would be allowed to be a part of her son's life, allowed to see him, go out with him, pamper him. Explaining this to Tony would be extremely difficult. She would have to confess that she had been deceiving him for 11 years. It would break the man's heart who had already suffered a lot from her. Hermione wanted a good, no hard feelings party, so she spent all day at the stove, organizing one of the most successful dinners she'd ever had with her husband. Wow. Tony made his way into the kitchen, following the trail, mouth-watering in the aroma of forbidden meat. Did I miss an important date? What holiday is today? His wife appeared before him in a modest dress and apron. "Hi, honey." She gently pecked him on the cheek, as she had not done for a long time, and invited him to the table. "You scare me with a nervous smile," the man admitted. "I did something wrong." "It's not like you decided to poison me." Hermione felt uneasy too. She was scared, though she trusted that Tony would support her decision. To resist would have been foolish. "Spring's Festatas," she suggested, and held out a glass to her husband's face, a little red. "I want to relax." The couple occasionally talked over each other, enjoying the flavors, succulent dishes. Tony complimented his wife on her sincerity, noting that after all these years she had learned how to make a decent glass of sweet, helped her relax a little. She threw herself on the back of her chair and looked at Tony, her lips pursed. He seemed to know what he was going to talk about. "I'm filing for divorce," she said calmly. Her husband didn't interrupt, letting her talk. "In order to avoid questions, I don't have anyone else. I'm not leaving. Our marriage has been over for a long time, but we didn't want to admit it. I'm asking you to set me free because I am ready to let you go. We lost interest in each other long ago. We can't get what we want." Tony listened quietly to his wife and, in agreement, nodded. "We should have talked a long time ago and faced the truth. There's no need to torture each other. We could go to the registry office together. Tomorrow lunchtime, for example." For a while, the couple also shared a roof over their heads. The apartment was registered in Eric's name. Hermione had lived in it since she was a student, so Tony was the one who had to leave, to the surprise of the spouses. Their last days were spent laughing together. The woman helped her husband pack his things. Together they sorted through memorable knickknacks, occasionally examining the tiers. They shared memories and hopes that didn't come true. Looking ahead and realizing she couldn't afford such a fancy apartment on her own, she put it up for sale. She was going to move to where there would be 2 rooms for her, and possibly her son. The woman had to think back to the red diploma that had appeared on the shelf with her papers. Ever since she had graduated from university, as Hermione was running through the interview process, a call caught up with her. Mickey had arranged to meet at her place. "Your place is spacious." The man looked around, stepping over the threshold of the apartment for a while. "I'm selling it." The woman invited him into the kitchen and offered him something to eat. "What's the news?" Mickey took a chair by the window. "You're right, my family had a secret." The man said that after she said this, he went to his father and he had to do a little investigation to get the truth. Gennady was then a budding businessman whose success seemed undeniable. He carried his pregnant, beautiful wife in his arms. But soon problems began in Mickey's father's business, and he had to hide abroad. His father left his mother in the care of a maid. She was always there to comfort her when her mother began to panic. She was left alone. No relatives around. My husband ran away. And then the country was in a mess. Those who were building businesses were being squeezed especially hard. That was just the beginning of the mess, which then engulfed the whole country. According to the maid, my mother died in childbirth, and only one of the twins could be saved. I was sickly, but stronger than my brother. The maid used to take me out and wait for my father to come back. He married her afterwards, appreciated her care and concern for his son. Only this story did not coincide with what Mikia told. When Gennady learned that his second son might be alive and the maid was hiding it from him, he called his wife in for a serious talk. A father in anger is scary. She was frightened. This way he would not hurt her. But we are talking about our own son, who was torn away from the family all his life by her effort's mother, that is, stepmother. After our own mother died, she decided to put my brother in an orphanage. Times were turbulent then. So she decided that it would be easier for her and my father to take care of one child. Daddy didn't doubt her words and didn't know that his other son lived somewhere. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have known about my brother and the fact that my mother wasn't my own. It's not easy to accept. He and my father are at odds now. We lived together for so many years, and my stepmother was duplicitous. Neither he nor I could forgive her. Anyway, if it wasn't for your persistence. Thank you for following me around and asking me to listen. Hermione smiled at Mickey, and he returned her smile, remembering the mistake of her youth that had caused her to cheat on her husband and lose her son. If she'd confessed to Tony right away about the affair, who knows how her life would be now. Have they found Jacob yet? Hermione asked anxiously, watching as the man twirled a mug of tea in his hands. They found him. Only fate did not favor him. He lived even then in some ramshackle house in the village, and remained there. Worse, my father and I found him in an orphanage for the disabled. My God, what's wrong with him? Sincerely, the woman worried. Jacob had been separated from his family, had experienced a difficult childhood. At the orphanage, he was even known as a thief, and among the other children in the institution, the teachers kept them strict, and the boys often waved with their fists, measuring who had more strength. Back then, you were still a skinny boy and learned to stand up for yourself and for those who couldn't answer for themselves. We'll get the bully in custody. After several cases of theft, a policeman was invited to the orphanage. Alex's visit made a lasting impression on Jacob. He became the kind of man the boy wanted to look up to. He followed him around but didn't ask questions. He simply observed how he interacted with difficult conspiratorial teenagers, that he did not rush to use force or threats, but tried to find common ground with the children who had been abandoned by their parents. Alex began to visit the residents of the orphanage more often than not for the sake of educational work. He acted as a volunteer, talking more about the peculiarities of the outside world in which the future graduates were to live without the care of adults. Jacob became attached to the man, and the man became attached to him. The man did not have long to retire. He and his wife never had children. At that time, you could not cure many diseases, and you could not even identify the reason why the couple remained childless. After talking to his wife, Alex decided that they would adopt a boy. Jacob was almost 12 at the time. People they knew dissuaded the couple because the child was old enough, and what if he didn't pay or wouldn't be able to be raised? But nothing frightened Alex. The boy grew up in love, surrounded by the attention of the couple. He finished school well, got an education, found work in his profession and everything, helping his elderly parents, who now lived from pension to pension. Alex, after leaving the police force, got a job as a construction guard. But he only had enough money for the bare necessities. How was it that Jacob was almost homeless? Hermione wondered after hearing about her brother Mickey's plight. He'd lost his parents in a fire. He'd stayed with friends after a party. And at night, there was a short circuit in the apartment. The wiring was old in those houses. Alex and his wife didn't make it. The rooms burned out along with all his belongings, savings, and documents. His mother left him a house in the village. That's where Jacob had moved to. He thought he'd live in a different environment, get used to his grief. Only he gradually became addicted. He started abusing alcohol, lost interest in life. But that wasn't the end of Jacob's ordeal. 4 years ago, he stood up for a girl on the street. 3 drunken thugs were scaring people in a private neighborhood. Some managed to fight off the other guys, took their wallets and valuables. And a girl who walked by decided to be bullied. Jacob heard her screams and rushed to her aid. Only those drunks had been drinking their brains out. They beat the man with a pipe and broke his spine. His father is with him now. He was transferred to a clinic under the supervision of the best doctors. Only their expertise doesn't seem to be enough. My father has arranged for his brother to be transferred to London. They're going to operate on him there. The prognosis is good, though the doctors used to say there was no hope. There's always hope. Hermione smiled, without a shadow of cheerfulness. Can I go see him? He is, after all, the father of our child. But first let me meet Michael. I'm begging you. Mickey didn't mind. He didn't have time to find out exactly what kind of man he was. But he understood that the boy needed a mother, and the woman was genuinely eager to get to know her child. At first she was driven out of jealousy by easy money. But now, having learned how cruel fate can be, not only to her, but to the people she happens to be related to, by chance, she cast aside her petty aspiration. Hermione was greatly worried on the way to meet her son from Mickey, and he did not escape the way her hands trembled finally, and he comforted the mother of her son. As best he could, without thinking of the grandiose gift, he said softly. When the woman stammered that this was their first meeting, she couldn't show up in front of her child empty-handed. Ordinary cakes will be enough. He likes sweets, but he keeps himself in shape. He rarely eats like that. If you give him something delicious, he'll love you right away. Hermione thanked the man for going out of his way to support her at such a difficult time. His own life was going through a bit of a tailspin. His mother had turned out to be a stepmother, a twin brother with whom they had grown up in completely different circumstances, had different temperaments. And then there was the mother of his son who had abandoned Michael as a toddler. Mickey himself needed support, but he believed that, in time, all passions would settle, everything would fall into place. Finally, Hermione found herself in the very apartment he'd been circling under the windows of for weeks, hoping to get even a glimpse of his son. Mickey let her through, pushing aside the sneakers scattered with her son. "Son, we have guests. Come and say hello," the man called. Hermione caught her breath. The nursery door opened. A boy in a tracksuit ran briskly out to them and looked curiously at the stranger with big, clear eyes. "Hello." He was the first to say hello. "Hello." The woman wanted to say something else, but barely a sob escaped her lips. She covered her mouth with her palm and leaned against the wall. "Dad, why is Andy crying?" Michael wondered. "Auntie is very happy to see you. She is overwhelmed with emotion." Mickey stroked his son on the head. "Her name is Hermione. She is a relative of yours. We met a little while ago. She saw you as a baby, and now she's upset at how handsome you've grown." The boy laughed. "Your dad is right. I've been looking forward to meeting you," Hermione said, pulling herself together. "And I've got a little something for tea." She opened the box of cakes in front of her son. He was delighted. "Wow, my favorites." Michael turned out to be an agile, open-minded kid. He chided his mother, told her about his school life hobbies in the swimming section, and boasted of the medals he had taken for first place in competitions. The kid willingly shared the details of his life, offered to play her a game of console racing, and even gave her 2 hugs with his cheek against her cheek. He was so affectionate. Once again, holding back her tears, Hermione turned to Mickey. It had cost her a great deal of effort to come to terms with the fact that she would have to be separated from her son for the night. Those 3 hours she had spent with the boy were forever in her memory. She didn't know how often and would allow her to see him. But she didn't want to spoil her impression of him in any way. The only comforting thing was that they had agreed to see each other again in the morning, going to visit Jacob together. Hermione and Michael entered the room holding hands. "Wow, you are the same," the boy exhaled as he looked at his uncle and father. Mickey had told his brother about the visitors beforehand, and the man prepared for the meeting. As far as it was possible, very soon the foster father led the boy out to the buffet, giving the rest of us a chance to talk. Hermione furtively looked at the paralyzed man who had not moved his legs on his own for several years. "This time I meet you in an even more horrible state than the last one." Jacob was the first to break the silence. "There's a beautiful woman in front of me, and I'm so weak. I, however, managed to have my own baby." Hermione hoped it would be funny, but they both stopped smiling at once. "It's strange. We have a son in common. We just met him. It was not for nothing that fate brought us together then." The man looked at her affectionately. "We were supposed to meet and give him light. I have much to tell you." The woman sighed and closed her eyes. She was about to confess how she had left their child in an orphanage. Afraid of hardship, how she'd spent 10 years in an unhappy marriage. How she wanted Mickey to like her and find wealth again. She was honest with Jacob and hoped he would appreciate it. They talked until a doctor entered the room. Neither Hermione nor Jacob said it out loud, but they knew they had to stick with each other. In spite of his weakness, the man seemed again and not very confident. Next to Tony, she had never felt this way. Her ex-husband often agreed with her. Indulging his whims and temper, she took it for granted. If he seriously challenged her decision, the woman would be furious with him, not considering him an equal. With Michael's father, she experienced the inexplicable. She respected him. Jacob, accompanied by his father, flew to the capital for surgery. Hermione waited for the news, but she did not sit idly by. The woman had been offered a position as a receptionist at a large hotel, and she accepted. The job was multifarious. She had to forget her personal life and think only about what was required of her. At first it was difficult, even too difficult. In the evenings, when she returned to her new little apartment, she sobbed with fatigue and tension. But thoughts of Michael kept her going. On weekends, the woman would come to visit. Mickey let them be alone and let them go for walks. He could see how the boy was positively affected by a mother's attention, which he had been deprived of all his life. The tenderness Hermione gave her son could not be replaced by anything else. Jacob's surgery was a success, but it required a long rehabilitation. "I will not give up, not now." The man stubbornly declared at every exercise session with the physical therapist. He sweated and strengthened his muscles, looking at Michael smiling and coming to see him as often as the woman's job allowed. For the first time in a long time, Jacob was motivated. He believed his life could change, for the man had found a real family of blood relatives, and now another life depended on him, his son's life. With each meeting with Jacob, Hermione became convinced that she cared about the man. They spent many hours together, entertaining each other with various stories. Now that she met her friend, she noticed that she had never looked as contentedly relaxed as she did now. "It's either the work that's done you good, or it's the man," she smiled slyly, seeing that Hermione wasn't even embarrassed. "That's all, Jacob. It's the first time it's happened to me. I fell in love like a girl," she admitted with a perfectly happy smile. Kennedy wouldn't let his son relax, even after hard physical exertion, making his brain work. I could use you in my company. So study all of this. He pointed to the stack of folders and books. And no objections. I need a smart employee. Michael loved going out with his new in-law. He was told the partial truth about his birth. They saved the details for when he was older, and the boy bragged to everyone that he had two daddies. From the side, Jacob was on his feet. Hermione and Michael were like a real family. One day during a picnic in the middle of the blooming grasses, the man asked Hermione to be his wife. "Do you think Mommy would agree?" he asked his son. The woman was completely confused. She was dizzy with happiness. "Mommy, say yes." The boy threw himself around both parents' necks and shouted there will be a wedding. After, in the solemn atmosphere of the hall of the wedding palace, she answered agreed and put the wedding ring on her finger. The bride looked at the assembled crowd. Among the guests were her proud, happy parents. A stately, smiling Mickey whistled during the newlyweds' first kiss. Her son steering a puffy skirt over his mother's dazzling dress. Looking at them, the woman realized that she had found East Jamian love and family only through pain and disappointment. Now she appreciated every moment of life and was going to live it with dignity.